Okay, great. That's awesome. Okay, and Gary, you can see the
I'm just
slide?
seeing revenue generation action planning. I'm not seeing your monitor.
Okay. Can you see PowerPoint though?
Not yet.
Okay.
I'm just wondering though, if he's using the telephone instead of the computer for audio, are you going to be able to record the audio that way?
Yeah, because the phone link actually connects through the computer system. It's pretty nifty that way.
Yeah, I'm connected with GoToMeeting through my phone. Oh, now I can see your monitor.
You can see the PowerPoint there?
Yeah, so I'm looking at LO.
Fabulous. Okay, so we are recording, and I am thrilled to be joined today by Gary Brown from Focal Point, a certified business coach, who is here to talk a bit about getting a social enterprise off the ground and what some of those important first steps are in achieving liftoff, as Gary's going to talk a bit about. Gary has a wealth of resources and knowledge in terms of working with business leaders and social entrepreneurs and looking into the areas of innovation. So I am thrilled to be joined by Gary today. We have Peter, who's joining us live, and we know we will have many more logging on after the fact to view this recording. This series is part of the this webinar is part of the Social Enterprise series that is being hosted in partnership by the United Church's Edge Network as well as Small Business Solver. And we are thrilled to be offering resources to social entrepreneurs and innovators in terms of some of the areas of the practical pieces that are currently missing from the library that is out there for resources and information. So today I am really excited to have this conversation with Gary, and I want to turn it over to you, Gary, to say a few words of welcome. And one last piece of housekeeping before I do that, though, is Peter, at any point, if you have any questions, it looks like your microphone is now off, so I'm going to ask us to use the chat space, which you should be able to see, and use that chat space to ask any questions or comments that you have, and we'll look forward to chatting together in a conversational webinar here. So welcome, Gary. I'm going to turn it over to you now.
Lauren, thank you very much. It's very exciting to be part of your program. I was at the Saturday event in Toronto, 4 or 6 weeks ago, and I must say there were a lot of very exciting entrepreneurs sort of flexing their social enterprise muscles, and this is a really cool opportunity to sort of help them drink from the fire hose, if you will. So if you're going to roll the camera for me, Lauren, if we could move on to the next slide.
There we go.
And I've just nominally named this presentation, and I really want it to be as interactive as it can be, but I'm talking about an approach where I've decided to become an entrepreneur, full stop, and then that's followed with a now what? What do I do? So I move on to that next slide, and this is, from my standpoint, an important consideration in terms of running a business is, what do I do to achieve liftoff? And I'm really going to be talking about a number of things that in my mind are really quite critical to this whole notion of achieving liftoff. So if I could just start with a brief introduction of myself. As Lauren said, I am a Focal Point business coach and find that it's extremely exciting to have the opportunity to help business owners, and whether you're in a social space or purely for profit, it really doesn't matter, but helping business owners achieve a future that's different than their present. And for me, the whole conversation is one about helping people understand what type of opportunities might be there that that they're otherwise going to sort of gloss over perhaps. So the next slide, please. So we've decided to open up our little business, and I wouldn't mind sort of asking the question of our listeners, and that is, what are your objectives? You've decided to go into business, and what are the 1, 2, 3 things that you think are really important that you need to achieve? Any thoughts there?
So we have Peter logged on live with us. Peter, do you have any, from your experience, I don't know what your background is or what's bringing you here today, but do you have any particular objectives that you're bringing, that you're looking to glean insight from Gary on? Sales and growth is what Peter's offered here.
And those are very common questions that people pose, and we will get into that kind of conversation. I'd like to go to the next slide, Lauren.
There we go.
And this is me as an entrepreneur suddenly going, oops, as I run into a brick wall. And that brick wall is intended to symbolize the obstacles, the challenges that we frequently face as entrepreneurs. In fact, I'd suggest that the biggest single indicator of somebody's success is their ability to overcome obstacles. Peter, I'm curious to know why you're interested in sales and growth. What would you say one or two top challenges might be?
And Peter's also just added profit to that list as well.
Okay.
So Peter, you get to really be in conversation with Gary today.
Should I go off mute?
If you want to go off mute, and we can just hear you.
So I find.
Hi, sorry about that.
There he is.
I had to plug in my headphone. Okay, yeah. Well, in my particular case, I'm trying to actually build a new social network and communication system, and trying to get people to join something that nobody knows about, and being able to do that without tremendous marketing expenses is quite a challenge.
Okay.
So it's just trying to
really
create awareness, in the beginning, and even though we're still in a beta test kind of stage right now, to get it to a point, I want to get people even using it just for beta testing.
Right.
Before we start promoting it. Right.
Okay. Well, certainly, every business is going to either succeed or fail on the strength of what I'm referring to as weight of wealth. This is the customer formula. It doesn't matter whether we're a for-profit, not-for-profit, we all need sales. And when I say sales, I don't necessarily mean I've sold a piece of hardware. I'm holding up a pen in my hand at the moment. But it's the idea that I've sold a concept, I've sold an idea, I have sold a product. And it's about moving somebody else to sort of your side of the fence, if you will, and agreeing that they're going to do what it is you'd like them to do, frankly. And we could really quickly talk about revenue generation with this slide and the one that's going to follow, but the way to wealth really boils down to 4 central elements, and that is, I need to find leads, and out of this field of leads, I'm going to convert them, and I'm showing here effective success rate. Well, that's a conversion rate. So I need to convert a lead to a customer. So where do I find leads, and how many do I need? What's my conversion rate? Those two numbers multiplied together, out pop the number of customers I have. And the next slide, Lauren, is the back half of the way to wealth equation. This is the revenue side, if you will. And that is, I now know the number of customers, and in the example I'm showing, I've got 10 customers. Well, what's the average size of the sale that I make during a given period? And let's assume we're talking about a year. So what's the average size of the sale through the course of the year? And how many sales do I make to that customer? We'll take those two numbers multiplied by customers, and guess what? We've got our annual revenue. So, it's really easy, and I could say, the program's over. Thanks for listening for 5 minutes. But this slide that I'm showing is kind of a metaphor for simply taking that quick and dirty approach. I've got a picture of a pole vaulter, up and over, and then I've followed it with a question mark. What happens next is what I'm trying to suggest. Well, what I'm trying to say with this pole vaulter is that pole lands in a very small landing space. And I like to think about foundations. I like thinking that as we construct our business, that we're really talking about a solid foundation. And the landing space for a pole vault just doesn't cut it in my mind. I think we need to have something far more substantial that's going to allow us to have a business that is going to not only survive, but also thrive. So with solid foundation in mind, what I'd like to talk about next is really this next slide, in which I've labeled this you, and that could certainly be you, me, and everybody that's in the business of being an entrepreneur. And it's really important that we have a good sense of clarity as to not only who we are, but what it is we're trying to do. And I came across something not all that long ago, referred to as the Carnegie Triangle. And I don't know how many of our listeners may have encountered this themselves, but really quickly, Andrew Carnegie, 100 years ago, fabulously wealthy, decided that he was going to spend some of his money and determine how and what makes a business owner successful, what really makes an individual successful. And Andrew determined at the end of this study that there are really three elements that contribute to a person's success. And if you're able to see the slide, which I'm not at the moment.
You're not able to see it, hey?
I just lost it. There are three essential elements, and they are skills, knowledge, and attitude. And we're back in business.
Awesome. Yeah, I tried to make it full screen there because I know you have a few little illustrations that come into play, but we'll do it as we can.
No, this is fine, just as it is.
Awesome.
So the three elements form this triangle again: skills, attitude, and knowledge. And the question we like to pose of people is, so if I tell you that these three constitute 100% of one's success, Peter, let me ask you, what percentage would you attach to those three attributes?
What percentage would I attach to these three attributes?
Yeah, I mean, out of 100%, what's the contribution of each of the three?
I would say that attitude probably is about 50%.
Okay.
And skills and knowledge might be the other 25% each.
Okay, split it down the middle. All righty. Well, with the next slide, what the study actually determined is that attitude represents 85% of our success. And if you've had experience hiring people, or you've worked in larger organizations before, if you think back, chances are if somebody got asked to leave, they probably left as a result of some, let's call it, poor attitude that was being displayed. So invariably, we hire for skill, but fire for attitude. And I think it's really important to understand that as a foundational part of your toolkit. Undoubtedly, you're going to be involved with other people in your entities, and it's really, really important to think about their fit. And this is a fit from an attitudinal standpoint. Chances are the skill set that's required can be acquired by that individual if they don't already have it when they join your organization. And that adds to their knowledge. Their experience in working with you adds to their knowledge. But we have very little opportunity to impact one's attitude. So it's really, really, really important to think about attitude, not only in the hiring of the people that you're going to be bringing into the organization, but also as you think about confronting those challenges and obstacles that we've already made reference to. Am I going to be optimistic? Am I possessing enough self-confidence that I know I can get this done? So attitude is an extremely important attribute to possess, really. And with that in mind, I'd like to play a little video here.
So I'm going to just, if you bear with me, I'm going to try something to play here. Try and make it full screen. I know it's disappeared for you. I'm going to
disappeared for me. Yeah.
Bring that back.
Oh,
you see it again?
Go here. I can see the screen, and we've got start with why.
Okay, let's
author
play
coming up. Excellent. Here it comes. This is 5 minutes long. Lauren, is there sound?
Can you hear it through the computer there? The sound? No, okay. So what I'm going to do then is I'm going to play it through my speakers.
Where others aren't.
Can you hear now?
Yes.
I call it the golden circle. Why, how, what? This little idea explains why some organizations and some leaders are able to inspire where others aren't. Let me define the terms really quickly. Every single person, every single organization on the planet knows what they do, 100%. Some know how they do it, whether you call it your differentiating value proposition or your proprietary process or your USP. But very, very few people or organizations know why they do what they do. And by why, I don't mean to make a profit. That's a result. It's always a result. By why, I mean what's your purpose, what's your cause, what's your belief? Why does your organization exist? Why do you get out of bed in the morning? And why should anyone care? Well, as a result, the way we think, the way we act, the way we communicate is from the outside in. It's obvious. We go from the clearest thing to the fuzziest thing. But the inspired leaders and the inspired organizations, regardless of their size, regardless of their industry, all think, act, and communicate from the inside out. Let me give you an example. I use Apple because it's easy to understand and everybody gets it. If Apple were like everyone else, a marketing message from them might sound like this. We make great computers. They're beautifully designed, simple to use, and user-friendly. Want to buy one? Meh. And that's how most of us communicate. That's how most marketing is done. That's how most sales is done. And that's how most of us communicate interpersonally. We say what we do. We say how we're different or how we better, and we expect some sort of behavior, a purchase, a vote, something like that. Here's our new law firm. We have the best lawyers with the biggest clients. We have, we always perform for our clients, do business with us. Here's our new car. It gets great gas mileage. It has, leather seats. Buy our car. But it's uninspiring. Here's how Apple actually communicates. Everything we do, we believe in challenging the status quo. We believe in thinking differently. The way we challenge the status quo is by making our products beautifully designed, simple to use, and user-friendly. We just happen to make great computers. Want to buy one? Totally different, right? You're ready to buy a computer from me. All I did was reverse the order of the information. What it proves to us is that people don't buy what you do, people buy why you do it. People don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. This explains why every single person in this room is perfectly comfortable buying a computer from Apple. But we're also perfectly comfortable buying an MP3 player from Apple, or a phone from Apple, or a DVR from Apple. But as I said before, Apple's just a computer company. There's nothing that distinguishes them structurally from any of their competitors. Their competitors are all equally qualified to make all of these products. In fact, they tried. A few years ago, Gateway came out with flat screen TVs. They're eminently qualified to make flat screen TVs. They've been making flat screen monitors for years. Nobody bought one. And Dell came out with MP3 players and PDAs. And they make great quality products, and they can make perfectly well-designed products, and nobody bought one. In fact, talking about it now, we can't even imagine buying an MP3 player from Dell. Why would you buy an MP3 player from a computer company? But we do it every day. People don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. When we communicate from the outside in, yes, people can understand vast amounts of complicated information like features and benefits and facts and figures. It just doesn't drive behavior. When we communicate from the inside out, we're talking directly to the part of the brain that controls behavior, and then we allow people to rationalize it with the tangible things we say and do. This is where gut decisions come from. You know, sometimes you can give somebody all the facts and figures and you say, I know what all the facts and details say, but it just doesn't feel right. Why would we use that verb? It doesn't feel right, because the part of the brain that controls decision making doesn't control language. And the best we can muster up is, I don't know, it just doesn't feel right. Or sometimes you say you're leading with your heart or you're leading with your soul. Well, I hate to break it to you, those aren't other body parts controlling your behavior. That's all happening here in your limbic brain, the part of the brain that controls decision making and not language. But if you don't know why you do what you do, and people respond to why you do what you do, then how will you ever get people to vote for you or buy something from you, or more importantly, be loyal?
So I don't know how many times I have listened to Cynic, but every time I listen to him, I find that it's drinking some more of the Kool-Aid, if you will. Can we just back up for a sec, please?
Yeah.
I'd just like to make a couple of comments about the start with why.
Yeah.
So to say, I just find him extremely insightful, and what I really find, I suppose I'm going to say impactful, is that notion when he's describing Apple about Apple chooses to be different. And I think that is so important. And I just can't count the number of times I get into conversations with people and they talk about features and benefits. And when you think about it, when we do that, we're really talking about ourselves. You know, it's our product, an extension of ourselves, perhaps, our company, but it's all about me. And we're trying to engage in a conversation with somebody that wants to hear about them. You know, they're not really that interested in us. So the trick in my mind is to step back and say to ourselves, okay, how do I cast my message so that it really is about the client? So really, what is it that causes me to get out of bed in the morning? You know, what is my message that's going to be so compelling that somebody out there is going to say, you know what, I want to be part of that community, if you will, because it resonates with me. So I'd really encourage people to spend a little bit of time with Cynic. He's got a book, Start With Why, around this subject of the Golden Circle. Invest a couple of dollars and spend some time reading it. But there are multiple videos, too, on this same subject, so if you'd like more detail, it's there. Anyway, Lauren, we can move on if you don't mind.
There we go.
In the spirit of trying to get all of this fire hose consumption completed. So it just strikes me that, all right, that's an interesting position to jump off and then sort of look at ourselves a little bit in terms of my next actions. We have within the focal point world something that we call a diamond mapping exercise. And you see that it's described as speaking about balance. We look at a quadrant here with financial independence, business success, health, fitness, family relationships plotted in this matrix. And all we ask people to do, and if you'd even take a moment, everybody that's on the call at the moment, to think about what score would I give myself on these 4 dimensions. And this is not an exercise in precision, it's just about getting close. But, excuse me, where would you say you are in the financial independence realm? How successful is your business? How's your health and fitness, and how are those family and relationships? Excuse me. So just take a moment, think to yourself where you'd put your own plot points. I'm just going to pause for a couple of seconds so you can all be thoughtful. Lauren, why don't we move on and take a look at the next slide then. So here's a situation where I'm illustrating that down the road sometime, and the red lines are indicating sometime in the future. Let's pretend that it's 3 years from now. And this is where I would like my plotting to take me. So I'm going to be an 8 rather than a 6.5 on the financial independence, for instance. My business success will be up there to 9 versus 6.5 or something. And around the matrix you go. Well, I'm trying to point out as an example on the business success side that if in fact we want to achieve a 9 in 3 years' time, and we're sitting at something less than 7, well, there's obviously a gap there. So there's a gap in what my dream is versus what my reality is. And having that gap really should be sparking one's interest and awareness, really, in creating a set of goals for yourself that speak to that future that you're trying to create. And very specifically, what is it that we're trying to achieve? And be very specific in that definition. Make it time-based and write it down. And if I could have the next slide, please, Maestro. And I don't know how many people are familiar with the notion of Pareto's principle, or the 80-20 rule is something maybe we hear more commonly. But the real salient part of, or the important part of this message is that regardless of what that goal set might be, regardless of what our daily activities might be, it's really important to recognize that in many, many, many situations, the results that we're achieving, or at least a large part of them, and the 80% shown here on the slide, are likely coming from something like 20% of our activities, our actions, hence the 80-20 rule. And that holds in many situations in our lives. It works certainly in the business world. You probably find that 80% of your sales come from 20% of your customers. Is it going to be spot on each and every time? No, but it's indicative of the fact that only a small percentage of the actions that we take lead to a large percentage in our outcomes. So just be mindful of that as a concept as you go forward. Any questions about that? I mean, that's not a lot of time to sit and ponder, but we've got Simon Sinek encouraging us to start with why. You might be interested to know I did some searching to find out what his why statement is, and discovered that he talks about inspiring people so they can inspire others. I've got a degree in engineering, tend to be quite left-brained, and I said to myself, well, that really is kind of a what I do. I inspire people. But then I realized the why is tacked on to the end of it. And just be really helpful for people to think in terms of, you know, we're talking about your purpose, really. So what's my purpose? Well, maybe it starts with a really brief what I do. You know, I inspire others as an example. But why do you do it? You know, what is that overriding reason that's got you standing at the front of the parade, leading the charge for whatever the social activity you're engaged in, whatever the business you're engaged in is? You know, what's that why statement? We talked briefly about goal setting, you know, identifying your gap, and a gap provides you with an opportunity to build a roadmap. You know, how am I going to close the gap? Peter, any questions?
I'm really, Peter, do you have any questions as Peter's either can turn on your audio or type?
Not right
now.
No,
not right now,
okay.
Peter's saying. Gary, I'm compelled by the Sinek's idea of why, and especially thinking about the Social Innovation Challenge that all three of us, yourself, myself, and Peter were all at here in Toronto, and I know many of our viewers for these social enterprise webinars will be participants from not only the Toronto Social Innovation Challenge, but others that have happened and will happen across the country. I was really struck at the Toronto Challenge, for example, by the 60-second pitches at the beginning on the Friday night, and how many of them did really come from a message of why, and not an innovative idea that stemmed from people's own personal whys. So it was something about, you know, Sinek saying inspiring inspiring others. That
inspiring people so they can inspire others.
Yeah, that I mean, that was what has left the most lasting impact on me after the challenge, was how those, close to 40 innovators came with something kind of a personal why that that inspired their business idea or their project idea. Yeah.
Right. There's a cautionary note I think that we should make. I just came from a 2-hour summer company mentoring program here in Kitchener-Waterloo, and we're talking about why. Start with the why in that program as well. My cautionary note is that, we get off on the right track, and then as we start getting involved in doing the doing, we sometimes lose sight of that why, and we get into a lot of what detail. So I think it's really important that we be consistent. We're starting with purpose. You might use the word vision for that word as well, perhaps.
Right.
And that's that overarching, this is what I'm trying to get accomplished. I mean, this is that solid foundation that I'm referring to. But then it's just critically important that everything hangs from that. You can hook it together. It's like building a story, really. And the story needs to have some logic to it, for people to understand your message.
Right.
And I just find Sinek, I think he's brilliant. I think it just is a fascinating way to look at what it is you're trying to accomplish. And when you think about our businesses, regardless of how good our website might be and how good our social presence might be, I think at the end of the day, it's people talking to people. It's still the need to know, like, and trust. And how do we get to that trust with the person that we might transact business with? And I can't think of a more powerful way than, my understanding what your purpose is. And if it resonates with me, we're almost all the way around the bases.
Right. Do you have tools for people to be checking back in with that why? Like, I mean, it strikes me that, we can start from that place, and then as we get down the road, we kind of focus in on other things, and the challenge there might be losing sight of that why, as you say. In working with people, do you have kind of tools that you use to help them kind of refocus in on that why?
Well, for me, that would be goal setting.
Right.
That would be a clear articulation of what my why is. And I mean, writing it down and reviewing it every day. And that may sound mundane, perhaps, to some. It might, in my mind, it makes me think back to my corporate background where I'd see vision statements plastered on the wall. Well, if that's all you do, it's kind of like having the checklist to say, yes, I did it, put the check beside it, now I can move on and forget about it. And when that happens, we've lost the whole purpose. We've lost the value of taking that approach in the first place.
Right.
So we really need to demonstrate, in my mind, quite a bit of discipline to say, this is what I started out doing, and unless I'm going to, pivot, then this really is the central issue or plank in my platform, and I need to stay true to it.
Yeah.
Gary, can I make
discipline? It's writing it down. Sorry, is that Peter?
Yeah,
Sure.
Gary. Just as an illustration, though, as an example, with my own case, I'm trying to build this network, and what's driving it? What's driving me? It's not the money, but it's a mission, which is to help people help each other.
Right.
And it's by creating this communication system and network that I hope to enable them to be able to help each other, right?
Right.
But when they hear the message help each other, that might, to some people it feels like it's has to do with social workers, or it sounds like it's a lot of work. They seem to be more interested in my case anyway, as to how does it work. So we've gone from help people to help each other to local connections worldwide, and now we've shifted it to people and places to meet. And that seems to be most easily understood by most people, and it maybe does provide a little bit of a why in there, maybe not too explicitly, but to meet. And who is it? It's people and places, and then why is to meet. And then what you do at the meeting. I mean, there's any number of things that can come out of it.
Well, you said something, you used a word that I'd like to backtrack on, Peter, and it was the word understood.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to make a connection between our understanding, which left brain, neocortex kind of thinking, to cynic, who's talking about the limbic and where our emotions reside and where decisions are made. And the caution is when we only speak to left brain, i.e., do you understand what I'm saying? Yes, I do. No, I don't. Doesn't necessarily motivate behavior. That behavior is an emotional rooted thing. So the suggestion that I'd make in that sort of situation is develop a message that speaks to, and I tend to say, the benefit of the benefit. So what's the benefit of people getting together to meet? So, well, it might be friendship. It might be, a de-stressor. I mean, it's something beyond just that meeting somebody else. What is the benefit of that? How do you feel about that? So I think we would all benefit from putting a lot more feeling kind of content into our messaging.
Mm-hmm.
In order to attract the people you're trying to attract, the people that think like you do, for instance, as Cynic is suggesting. So, and in fact, there's a great book written by the Heath brothers called Switch that will stimulate some thinking with regards to your messaging.
Okay. Yeah, so
shall we push on?
Yeah.
I think that it requires some continuous surveying of the clients as well, of your customer base, so that you also stay in tune with what they seem to be motivated by.
So let me throw another book title at you that speaks to what you just said, and that is, what got you here won't get you there. So if we have an impression or an understanding of our customers' needs, requirements, etc. today, we can't just assume it stays static. We have to be in constant conversation. So I'd like to shift into a little more left brain side of this conversation, and I'm throwing up here a business model canvas. It comes from an organization called Strategizer. You can find this on the internet. But I find this to be a really convenient way and a very concise way to look at one's business. And if we start in the center of that slide where it says value proposition, top center, and move to the right, you're looking at customer relationships, customer segments, and then beneath that you've got channels. Those four, when you think about them, drive our revenue streams that you see in that bottom rectangle. Then the elements that are on the left of that, key resources, key activities, key partners, those are those activities, those elements, again, that drive the cost in our organizations. And for the sake of the liftoff conversation, and Lauren, if we could just advance, please. I was intending that we focus on customer segments, value propositions, and channels really quickly. But this is a great canvas, as it's referred to allow you to look at your business in its entirety and see how making a change in one element has a knock-on effect throughout the other elements and what might need to change, and provide some other insights. So this slide is intended to talk to customers. So there are four silhouettes there, if you will. One of them is wearing a medallion or a medal, and I'm trying to symbolize that that's our target customer. We might talk about the population of prospects that are out there, but we need to get fairly specific, in fact, very specific in terms of defining who is my actual target market. So, Lauren, please. One of the important elements of defining our target market is this term demographics, and examples of demographics are shown there with age, gender, income. And, if we just talk about, the great unwashed out there, it's pretty difficult to create a message that's going to resonate with anybody in particular. So the more specific we can be in our demographic description of who we're targeting, the better off we will be. And then the next slide, I'm referring to psychographics. I don't know if this is as often paid attention to or not, but by this I'm talking about the frustrations, the fears, the aspirations that your target market likely has. Again, not talking about precision here. This is something where we as individuals can make educated guesses, if you will, as to what is likely the frustration of my target market. And if you have difficulty doing that, it probably says your target market isn't defined well enough yet for you to be able to come up with a set of frustrations, fears, etc. So you really want to get a target market that could be, we're talking about females from the age of 22 to 45, married, dual income, living in a 4-bedroom house, living in the suburbs, drive 2 cars, take 3 weeks vacation in the summer, 1 week vacation. I mean, that's the kind of detail that I'm talking about on the demographic side. And then fears and wants, etc., could be a fear of the economy and the ability to move into my next house. I'm expecting another child. We need another bedroom. I'm concerned that my spouse might have an issue with employment continuity. There's some noise about his industry suffering a little bit. Might there be a downturn? From an aspiration standpoint, something related to my children. I mean, what are those psychographic elements that resonate with your target market? Because what you really want to do is understand that target just as well as you possibly can. Does it have to be perfect? Absolutely not. We're trying to get close. I kind of liken it to the game of horseshoes. Doesn't need to be a ringer every time. Just needs to be within the width of the shoe to score a point. And if it doesn't work, your definition of target market or your subsequent definition, revise it. Make it a little tighter, make it even tighter again until you start to have enough understanding that you can really come up with a good definition. And I've got this next slide simply to say you need to be specific. Is this little character ultimately who your target is? I mean, maybe you've got 2 targets, in this case, perhaps it is children. Well, they might be the consumer of the product or service, but who pays for it? So it's possible, of course, to have more than one target segment. Right. But be as specific as you can be. Any questions around defining your target market? Peter, do you have a definition? Can you share?
Yes. Okay. Well, in my particular case, meetmehere.com is a global network of people and places to meet from near to far. And that can be around your current location or your home, your work, or some other address. So it's actually designed to be very generic, but at the same time, very specific, using very advanced filtering capability. The target market, I guess, there's probably several, but the first one in terms of members are both people or places. So the people target is probably more things like the millennials, 18 to 33-year-old students in particular. Many of them, they don't know anybody, and they like to network, and they're already familiar with social media. On the other hand, the places members, which are business or entities, I might be targeting associations and clubs, but also hotels and churches, anything that, or bars for that matter, places that are great places where people can meet. That's what I have in mind.
Okay. I mean, I think it's a good start. I would encourage you to go deeper. When you talk about people, the thing that went through my head was, for instance, new to Canada. Are these people that don't have a lot of connection, maybe a couple of family members, but, is that a specific subset that could be targeted? Is it, students? Is it newly married? I mean, there are a number of elements. So I think if you can tighten that up so that you can paint a really clear picture as to who it is. When you talk about different locations, churches, associations, you know, is there some common element that exists between those two different, I'll call them locations, that would help you define your target market?
Well, ideally, it's I guess the common element would be people who are sociable and who like to talk to other people and get to know new people, you know, or people who like to network. So there's socializing and there's networking.
Okay.
Go ahead.
My question, though, is if you're talking about people who are sociable and like to network, and that's great, but I'd ask you, how do you identify them? How do you find them? Because that third element that I made brief reference to in terms of channels is about reaching them.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you reach that? How do you find that? Unless it's really well defined.
Right.
Well, one of the ways will be Facebook advertising, I guess, potentially in the future. There's already in the social media kind of platform where there's meetups. But there's also any kind of community events, you know, where people are already gathered for some purpose. I don't know. It's a tough question.
I was going to say, I haven't done any Facebook advertising myself yet, but it might be a little bit like going fishing by throwing a grenade in the water. You know, and you get all sorts of fish, but they may not be what you want.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that Facebook has some ability to be quite specific as to who you're trying to target. So again, I'd just say be as specific as you can be. And when you think you're there, go further.
Right.
Okay.
Lauren, the next one, please. So this is unique selling proposition. You know, this is about value. This is about Simon Sinek, if you will. Start with why. What is it that we are offering this target segment or these target segments? What makes us different? What is that value that they can't get anywhere else but from us? Unique selling proposition. And I think you can make the argument that you could start with your USP or you can start with your target segment. I happen to start with customer first, but if you've got a really compelling start with why, then start there, you know, and then figure out who is the target segment that speaks to. The next one, please, Lauren. And something that I've included here just to sort of sharpen the saw, if you will, with regards to USP. And again, to me, this is differentiation. You know, how do I differentiate myself from everybody else? And there are 4 aspects to differentiation that I'm showing on this slide. The first is functionality. So I've got something that works better than yours. So the functionality between the two differentiates them. But over time, you're going to keep working on yours, and you're going to narrow the gap between your and my functionality. Well, you're forcing me now into the reliability game. Mine lasts longer, fails far fewer times than yours does. Again, you play the catch-up game, and soon the gap is so narrow, and we've increased reliability to such an extreme that customers don't care anymore. Well, I move on to convenience. You know, you can pick mine up on the sidewalk every block. Well, guess what? You chase me down, and again, we get to the point where customers find it so convenient that adding convenience doesn't mean a thing anymore. And the last bastion then of differentiation becomes price. Now, I find that in a lot of conversations, clients, prospects, customers tend to fixate on price as the holy grail. And they ceased, maybe they never started, but they just don't put an awful lot of thought, so it seems, into how do I differentiate rather than simply by reducing my price. And for a lot of us, we don't control the inputs on the product side or service side of what we do, certainly service side more so. But if it's product related, we probably don't control a lot of the cost. So price becomes a really difficult strategy to maintain when all we can do is reduce our price while not being able to reduce our cost. You know, it's a good way to go out of business, frankly. Anyway, it's an encouragement to think about how you can achieve a unique selling proposition that adds value. And then this slide is simply on channels. So that was the third element on the canvas that I wanted to briefly touch on. And this is what means do I, oh, you jumped ahead of me there.
Right.
It's okay. What are my means? What are the means by which I get my message to the marketplace, i.e. to those customers that I'm targeting? And also, how do I deliver it? I mean, is it a product that I stick in a box and mail it? Do I deliver it by hand? I mean, how do I get my product to my customer? Is it purely over the internet? And again, how do I get my message? Is it through social media? Is it billboards on telephone poles? What are the channels that work? And again, I would say depends on your target market. You know, so target market specificity becomes increasingly more and more important as you think through this model. Because if you don't know who you're talking to, you know, why not put a note in a bottle? Lauren, that last slide, please. And this is really stepping back a couple of paces and saying, okay, from an entrepreneurial standpoint, you know, how do I look at my business? We've talked about a bunch of things, and I'm, you know, trying a bunch of things. Some work, some don't. So I'd simply say, you know, as you're looking at your business and those actions you take, think about those things that do work, and you would benefit from increasing them. That'd be the first step to consider. The second one would be, so there are probably some things that don't work that well, you know, and I continue to do them. Well, don't. Decrease the amount of time you spend on those things that you can decrease the amount of time. You know, make it proportional to the benefits you get from them. Thirdly, there are probably some things that I do today that I should stop doing. And I don't know about anybody else, but one of the top ones on that list, and I'm kind of speaking for myself, might be procrastination. You know, I've got all these good ideas, but I just find it difficult to get out there and do it. Well, that'd be a good thing to stop with your procrastination. And then the other thing that can be really impactful is, what new actions could I take? What have I not done that I could add to this mix? And don't be afraid to try something new. Might not work, might be your thought. My response would be, so what? Stop doing it if it doesn't work. Try something new. You know, it's an iterative process. What's likely to happen if it doesn't work? Well, I might have spent a little bit of money. Good. Gain some education. Gain some learning. Bring something new to the table. And again, I'd say what got you here isn't going to get you there. So what you did in the past can't be relied upon to take you into the future. So always, always be open to the idea that there are some new things you could add. Look at other industries, maybe parallel industries, complementary industries, maybe something completely opposite to what you do, but they might be doing something that you can incorporate into your business that would help you differentiate your business from those around you. Be open to trying things. Be open to possibilities. And Lauren, I think we're at the last slide.
Any more questions?
We're at the top of the hour.
Yeah, so, fabulous timing.
Yeah, it worked. Questions?
You know, Peter, if you have any questions, chime on in here. As you are, I just want to kind of, looking back on the past hour we spent together and thinking of this webinar as part of a series. It strikes me that what you've shared for folks' toolboxes today, Gary, would be really helpful. I'm going to encourage people to view this one as one of the first webinars in the series. And then also kind of partway through, when they're starting to get deeper into some of that work, it strikes me that what you're sharing today would also be good stuff to kind of keep checking back in with. Yeah, so thank you so much. Peter is asking if he can get your contact information. Peter, Gary's, we have recorded the webinar today, and in one of the first slides there, Gary did include his email address. So I'll be getting the recording of this webinar after we finish today, and we'll be uploading it onto the Social Innovation YouTube page by the end of the week. So you can go back through there and grab Gary's email address, and it sounds like you would be open to hearing from folks, Gary, by including your email in there.
I'd be happy to respond to questions that somebody might have.
Awesome, yeah. Peter, any other questions? I mean, it's an interesting format here because I know there will be many people viewing this webinar after the fact who are bringing their own personal and particular experiences and projects and innovations that they're working on. So I think what you've really given us today, Gary, are the practical tools that can then be catered to each specific situation. So I know as we were going through, I was thinking of kind of two different areas that I work in currently, and how those tools that you've given can apply, and how much actually I need to kind of step back and do a bit of tweaking for some of those things. And so for those who are watching this webinar after the fact, I hope that today has given you a chance as well to be thinking through some of the processes. And oh, great, thanks, Peter. Yeah, to be thinking through some of that and kind of having a mirror on your own experiences as well. Peter has also just offered his email address, which is peter@meetmehere.com. Thanks, Peter.
Yeah, so I just want to say that I think you both have done an outstanding job with not only this presentation, but Lauren, just with the whole series. I think it's a great idea for keeping people getting to continue to get more educated in something that's very important.
I would echo that comment from Peter. In my past, sometimes I get the impression that people want to run out by the latest business book, and if I turn to page, pick a number here, but 170, and all will be revealed. Mm-hmm. And I can't help but think, folks, that business canvas in my mind is a really great place to start. It's about thinking, my metaphor tends to be pressing my fingertips together. It's about being thoughtful. It's about, okay, what are the issues that I need to confront? There isn't a magic bullet, and business doesn't have to be difficult, but it does require some attention. It does, in my mind, require that you be consistent. It does require that you look to be different.
Right.
So, Lauren, I've enjoyed doing this, and I appreciate having the opportunity to be a participant in the social innovation activity.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Gary, so much for taking the time today. This has been such a fabulous hour, and I just offer great thanks for you and your wisdom and experience, and also how engaging and participatory you made this, even with just a few of us logged on live. But I know that those who are accessing this webinar after the fact even will feel that kind of conversational element to this really important topic. So thank you so much for your time today. And to log off, you just need to hang up the phone and close off the meeting on your computer, and have a really, really great day. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Take care.
Take
All the
care.
best. Cheers.
And thanks, Peter.